We're told there's a perfect city out there, one that's clean, efficient, rational, designed to solve every problem. No poverty, no mess, no unpredictability, just order, control, and shining glass buildings. But that city doesn't exist. It's a fantasy, a lie, because real cities aren't machines. They're alive, messy, emotional, and shaped by the people who live in them. This is about the lie we keep telling, and what it's hiding underneath. The idea of a perfect city often begins with a plan. Streets run in straight lines, buildings rise in neat rows, parks, schools, and shops all sit in their proper place. From a distance, it looks calm and ordered, but up close, something is missing: life, complexity, and the things that make cities real. This vision comes from a long tradition. Plato's Republic laid the foundation. In it, he described a society led by philosopher kings, where every person had a fixed role. To keep this order, he proposed the noble lie, a made-up story told to keep people in line. The goal was peace through structure, not freedom. Centuries later, this same thinking shapes modern city plans. Today's ideal cities often follow top-down designs. Experts create detailed blueprints. They believe careful planning can solve problems like poverty, crime, pollution, and inequality. These cities rely on control, efficiency, and logic. They are built to remove risk and reduce chaos. But cities are not problems to be solved. They are living systems, shaped by people more than plans. Chandigarh, India, tells a similar story. Designed by architect Le Corbusier, it followed modern ideals of order and function. It had zones for living, working, and relaxing. But the plan left little space for informal life. Over time, people added their own touches: markets in odd corners, homes in leftover plots, shortcuts where paths were missing. The plan was rigid, the people were not. Even now, these myths continue through smart city projects. Cities are wired with sensors and screens. Data tracks energy use, traffic, and crime. The promise is a city that runs like a perfect machine, but the machine often overlooks people. Sensors may tell when lights should turn green. They cannot explain why some streets feel unsafe. Dashboards may show gaps in trash pickup. They don't ask why the trash ends up there in the first place. Top-down plans often treat residents as passive. They are expected to follow rules, use services, and stay within design limits. But people do more than use cities. They shape them. They create short paths through parks, start street markets, share taxis, and make do with small spaces. These actions don't follow plans, but they work. Dharavi, a dense neighborhood in Mumbai, shows what's possible without a master plan. Often labeled a slum, it is home to thousands of businesses and close-knit communities. People live near work, share resources, and rely on each other. Proposals to redevelop Dharavi often suggest demolishing it and replacing it with modern housing towers. But these plans risk wiping out the very networks that make the place function. This focus on order can also deepen inequality. In many planned cities, wealthier neighborhoods enjoy clean parks, safe streets, and good schools. Meanwhile, poorer areas lack basic services. They are rarely included in city plans unless they are marked for removal. Instead of reducing gaps, planning sometimes hides them behind walls, highways, or zoning rules. Cities grow through use, not just design. When people walk, they wear paths. When needs change, buildings are repurposed. When communities grow, they spill past boundaries. These actions don't always fit a plan, but they show how cities respond to real life. What planners see as disorder often reflects adaptation. Jane Jacobs understood this well. She wrote about cities like New York, where street life created safety and small businesses built strong communities. She challenged the idea that bigger roads and taller buildings made better cities. She believed that what looked like chaos was often deep order, one shaped by people, not by rules. Still, many in power hold on to the dream of the perfect city. It gives a sense of control. It suggests that problems have final answers. But cities are never finished. They are always in motion. Trying to freeze them into one form misses their point. Good planning doesn't try to solve everything. It makes space for what's already working. It watches before it acts. It learns from what people already do. It allows for trial, error, and change. It accepts that what works in one place may fail in another. A city should not feel like a machine. It should feel like a place people belong. That means accepting messiness. Sidewalk vendors, shared homes, backyard repairs, street musicians, these are not problems. They are signs of life. Rather than erase what doesn't fit, planning should protect it. Rather than control movement, it should make space for it. Rather than build from the top down, it should listen from the ground up. Cities do best when they allow for difference, for growth, for things that can't be measured. The myth of the perfect city suggests we can control everything, but real cities thrive when people shape them freely. The goal should not be order for its own sake. It should be life that can adapt, mix, and grow. A living city needs space to move, not walls to hold it still. Utopian cities promise order, beauty, and a better way of living. They are designed to solve problems. Their roads are wide, their buildings uniform, their public spaces clean and open. Everything is planned to fit together. But even when built to perfection, something feels wrong. These cities often do not work as intended. They may function on paper, but they fail where it matters most, in how they feel, how they hold communities together, and how they treat people's right to shape their own lives. One of the first problems is emotional. Utopian cities often feel empty, not because no one lives there, but because the space itself feels hollow. These places are built for function, not feeling. Streets may be wide and free of clutter, but they lack street life. Sidewalks may be present, but they stay quiet. Buildings may look sleek, but they don't invite people in. The order that planners prize comes at the cost of human connection. Take the example of Masdar City in the United Arab Emirates. It was designed as a carbon-neutral city. Its layout maximized energy efficiency. It used advanced systems for waste, water, and transport. From an environmental standpoint, it was a model. But residents described it as lifeless. Few people walked outside. Public spaces remained unused. The city met technical goals, but it ignored emotional ones. It didn't offer the small joys people find in older, chaotic neighborhoods: chance meetings, noise, color, and movement. In many cases, this emotional failure links to deeper social problems. Utopian cities are often built on land where people already live. To make room for the new plan, old neighborhoods are torn down. Homes, shops, temples, and gathering spaces disappear. Families and communities are pushed aside. What replaces them are blocks of housing towers or neatly arranged suburbs with rules and codes. These new places rarely feel like home. This kind of change breaks more than buildings. It breaks connections. When people lose their neighbors, their corner stores, their shortcuts through alleys, they lose parts of their lives. Social networks fall apart. People end up isolated, even in the middle of a city. They no longer feel rooted. A place that once carried memories becomes unfamiliar. A community that once supported itself becomes scattered. The failure lies in the assumption that people can fit into any mold, that they will adapt to any design, that life will take shape around structure. But that's not how cities work. People build routines around what's already there. They use space in unexpected ways. They create meaning through repetition, not design. When you force people to follow a new layout, you ask them to rebuild their lives from nothing. That rarely works. Consider the high-rise public housing built in many cities during the 20th century. These buildings replaced older neighborhoods labeled as slums. The new housing offered running water, elevators, and modern amenities, but they also removed the street-level life that had supported residents. Common areas were too large or poorly designed. Hallways became unsafe. Without small shops, porches, or stoops, people had fewer chances to meet. The result was social breakdown, not improvement. Beyond the emotional and social failures, there's a political one. Utopian cities are almost always imposed from above. Governments, planners, or private developers create the vision. They decide what the city needs, how it should look, and where people should live. Residents have little say in the process. Their lives are shaped by decisions they did not make. This kind of power imbalance affects more than just the design. It affects who gets to live in these cities and on what terms. In many cases, utopian plans serve elite interests. They offer clean streets, luxury housing, and controlled access. People who don't fit the image, street vendors, informal workers, migrants, are pushed out or ignored. The city becomes a gated vision of the future, rather than a shared space. Songdo in South Korea illustrates this pattern. Built as a smart city, it includes advanced tech in every aspect: traffic systems, energy use, waste collection. It was planned as a business hub with residential towers, wide boulevards, and green spaces. but very few residents had input in its creation. As a result, it struggles to attract people who see it as a real home. Many apartments remain empty. The city lacks the organic energy that comes from participation in mess. Political failure also shows up in how people interact with city systems. In a bottom-up city, residents push for changes. They organize, protest, negotiate, and shape their surroundings. But in a top-down utopia, most decisions are made by others. Feedback loops are weak. Governance happens at a distance. When residents do speak up, they may be ignored or punished. Over time, this leads to distrust and apathy. The problem isn't just that these cities are planned. Planning is useful. It's that the planning happens without listening. It assumes one answer fits all. It places the needs of the design over the needs of the people, and once built, it leaves little space for adjustment. The plan is locked in, the people are not. Real cities grow through negotiation. People push back, carve space, find new paths. They adapt old buildings, share tools, and mix uses. They resist control. They don't need perfection, they need flexibility. They don't need vision, they need voice. A utopian city may offer better air and cleaner streets, but if it fails to support life, social, emotional, and political, it will not last. It will stand as a model, but not as a home. It may impress from above, but disappoint from within. And in the end, it will fail not because it aimed too high, but because it refused to listen. Lucio Costa said, "Don't bother visiting Brasília if you've already formed an opinion and have preconceived ideas. Stay where you are. Let them say what they want. Brasília is a miracle." Brasília was built in the late 1950s to become Brazil's new capital. The government wanted a fresh start, away from the crowded and colonial cities along the coast. The plan was bold. The city would sit in the center of the country, drawing development inward. It would reflect progress, modernity, and national pride. At the heart of the project was a clear idea that careful design could shape society for the better. Architect Oscar Niemeyer and urban planner Lucio Costa led the effort. Their vision followed modernist ideals: clean lines, open spaces, and separation of functions. The city was laid out in the shape of an airplane. The wings held residential areas. The body included government buildings and civic spaces. Zoning was strict. Work, home, recreation, and shopping each had their own place. Traffic moved along wide boulevards. There were few sidewalks. The car was king. From a distance, the plan looked elegant. Government buildings sat in long rows, each one designed with sharp angles and bold curves. Residential zones featured repeated blocks designed to deliver housing at scale. Parks, lakes, and green areas broke up the concrete. The city looked clean and calm. It won praise from architects around the world. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But for many who lived there, Brasília felt strange. Residents soon noticed how hard it was to move without a car. Everyday needs required long trips. A simple errand could involve driving across wide, empty spaces. Walking felt unnatural. The roads, though clear of traffic, acted as barriers. Social life didn't spill into the streets. Public spaces were often too large to feel welcoming. People described the city as beautiful but distant. It lacked the noise, variety, and randomness found in older cities. The design also created sharp social divisions. While the central city housed government workers and professionals, poorer residents were pushed to the outskirts. These satellite cities lay beyond the planned area. They received little attention during the original development. Many lacked basic infrastructure. Residents often faced long commutes into the center. Over time, these outer areas became home to the working class, the people who kept the central city running but did not live in it. Inside Brasília's planned core, life followed the blueprint. Each residential unit had its own school, clinic, and shops. But the design discouraged interaction beyond each block. The zoning kept work and home separate. The layout made it hard to bump into neighbors or discover new places by accident. The city's structure didn't support chance or change. It offered security, but not connection. Over time, people began to push against the design. They found ways to adapt the rigid plan to their needs. In some areas, residents turned open spaces into community gardens. In others, local markets appeared where none were planned. Street vendors set up in corners of plazas. Children played soccer in lots never meant for games. What the plan had missed, the people supplied. These changes weren't part of any formal policy. They grew from daily life. People needed places to gather, trade, and rest. The original city design left few options, so they made their own. Trees were planted to shade sidewalks. Paths were worn into grass where none had been paved. Over time, these small acts gave the city a new shape, one that reflected human needs more than design goals. Community groups also stepped in. In satellite cities, residents organized to demand better transit, schools, and services. Over time, these areas grew into strong neighborhoods with their own identities. Though not part of the original vision, they became essential to the city's life. Many residents felt more connected to their local areas than to Brasília's polished center. Some of the strongest changes happened where the city's order left gaps. An example is the way residents adapted the superquadras, the large residential blocks designed to house thousands. Each block had fixed entrances, wide lawns, and strict layout rules, but residents began to soften these spaces. They added benches, planted gardens, and built informal paths. Over time, each superquadra developed its own character. Some became lively, while others stayed quiet. The plan had been uniform. The people made it diverse. Public transport also became a focus. Since the city was built for cars, buses had to be added later. The first systems were poor, and many residents spent hours commuting. In response, informal transport systems emerged: vans, shared rides, and makeshift stops. These systems didn't follow the plan but responded to real needs. Eventually, formal transit began to adapt to these patterns, not the other way around. Art and culture found their place too. In empty corners and wide-open lawns, events began to appear: street performances, outdoor concerts, protests. The large civic spaces, once symbols of control, became spaces of expression. They were too big for comfort, but people learned how to use them. As Brasília matured, its residents claimed space in ways the original designers never imagined. Still, the city's design continues to shape how people live. The separation of zones remains strong. Car ownership is still necessary for most. Informal economies, though present, face legal and spatial limits. Housing in the central city remains expensive. Poorer residents still face long trips to work. Yet the adaptations have softened the city's edges. They show how people respond when the built world does not meet their needs. Brasília remains a powerful example of a planned city. It shows both the strengths and limits of design. The plan created a bold symbol, full of meaning and clarity, but it also showed how life refuses to stay inside lines. People bend rules, reshape spaces, and find ways to connect. Over time, these acts changed the city more than any blueprint ever could. Le Corbusier's radiant city was never built, but its ideas shaped real places. It began as a bold plan for a modern city: clean, efficient, and rational. Le Corbusier believed that architecture and planning could solve the problems of urban life. His city would have tall towers surrounded by green spaces. Roads would be wide and traffic well managed. Everything would follow a clear structure. People would live, work, and relax in separate zones, each designed for one purpose. The goal was to bring order to what he saw as the chaos of old cities. In drawings and models, the radiant city looked futuristic. Skyscrapers stood in perfect rows. Parks filled the space between them. A few major roads carried cars quickly from place to place. Trains and buses moved through fixed corridors. There were no messy side streets or uneven blocks. The city was meant to be calm, efficient, and easy to manage. It reflected the values of the machine age: standardization, speed, and control. The plan influenced many post-war housing projects, especially in Europe. After World War II, cities needed to rebuild quickly. There was a shortage of homes. Governments turned to architects who could deliver housing at scale. Le Corbusier's ideas offered a clear path: build high, build fast, and separate uses. Many cities followed this model. They built housing towers surrounded by lawns, often far from shops or workplaces. The logic was simple. People would live in quiet, green areas and commute elsewhere to work or shop. But these places often failed. In theory, the towers offered light, air, and space. In practice, they became symbols of neglect and isolation. The green areas between buildings were too empty to feel safe. Long corridors and stairwells became dark and uninviting. Services were too far away. Shops and schools didn't grow naturally nearby because the plan didn't allow for mixed use. Residents felt cut off from city life. Prut Igo, a housing project in St. Louis, followed this model. Built in the 1950s, it featured large blocks, open spaces, and strict zoning. At first, it was seen as a success, but within 2 decades, it had fallen into decline. Maintenance costs rose, crime increased, community life weakened. By the 1970s, the city began tearing it down. The demolition became a symbol of the failure of top-down housing design. Though Le Corbusier didn't design Prout Ego himself, it carried the DNA of his ideas. The core problem was a mismatch between design and daily life. The radiant city assumed people would behave in predictable ways. It treated them as parts of a system. But people don't always follow plans. They gather in groups, build informal paths, open shops in their homes, and make spaces their own. The radiant city left no room for this. It worked only if people behaved exactly as imagined. When they didn't, the system broke down. The focus on control made things worse. In many projects inspired by Le Corbusier, there was little room for residents to shape their surroundings. Rules were strict. Spaces were fixed. Buildings looked the same, regardless of who lived in them. There was no sense of ownership. People became users of space, not creators of it. Over time, this led to disconnection. Residents felt like they were living in someone else's idea of a home. Le Corbusier believed he was improving lives. He wanted to give people better homes, cleaner air, and more space. But his approach came from the top down. It didn't ask people what they needed. It assumed that experts could design perfect solutions. It ignored the value of local knowledge, custom, and change. It treated the city as a machine to be optimized, not as a living place full of surprises. In places like the banlieues of Paris or the council estates of Britain, we still see the impact of these ideas. Many high-rise housing blocks follow the radiant city model. They were built quickly and cheaply, often without input from residents. Decades later, these areas face high unemployment, poor maintenance, and social tension. Governments now spend large sums to repair, redesign, or tear down these blocks. Some projects did adapt. In Marseille, Le Corbusier's United Habitation tried to mix uses. It included shops, a school, and a rooftop terrace. Residents shaped the space over time. Some opened businesses, others decorated their units or altered layouts. Still, the building drew mixed reviews. Some praised its innovation, others found it uncomfortable. It remains a rare case where Le Corbusier's vision came close to daily life. The radiant city left behind more than buildings. It shaped how planners think. It suggested that clarity and order could replace the messiness of real cities. But real cities are messy for a reason. They change with people's needs. They grow in layers. They make room for chance, error, and invention. When planning removes these things, it creates places that feel artificial. Le Corbusier saw beauty in the clean line and the open space. He saw the problems of the industrial city and tried to solve them with design. But in doing so, he reduced people to numbers. He imagined what they needed without asking them. He gave them light, but not joy, space, but not connection. His vision endures in drawings and in the shells of buildings that followed his lead. It reminds us that even the best ideas must meet the test of daily life. Plans may look good on paper, but cities succeed only when people can shape them in return. Smart cities are presented as the future of urban life. They promise clean energy, smooth traffic, and efficient services. They use data to manage waste, monitor air quality, and guide public transit. Sensors track movement. Algorithms adjust lighting. Apps tell you when the next bus is coming or where to park. At first glance, these cities seem like a natural step forward, more organized, more sustainable, and more convenient. But behind the surface, serious concerns emerge. Most smart cities depend on partnerships with private technology companies. These firms provide the hardware, software, and data systems that run the city. In return, they gain influence over how urban systems work. This can blur the line between public service and corporate control. A city may appear to act in the interest of its citizens, but its tools and decisions are often shaped by commercial priorities. Sidewalk Toronto is one example. A branch of Alphabet, Google's parent company, proposed a new kind of neighborhood along Toronto's waterfront. It promised smart housing, modular buildings, heated sidewalks, and real-time data to improve life. But as plans moved forward, people started asking who would control the data, how it would be used, and whether residents would have any say. Concerns about surveillance, privacy, and corporate influence grew. Eventually, the project was canceled, but the debate it raised remains. At the center of the smart city model is data. Cameras track vehicles. Microphones measure noise. Sensors follow water use, foot traffic, and air pollution. Algorithms take this information and make decisions: where to send police, how to adjust traffic lights, which neighborhoods get service first. These tools work fast and without fatigue, but they lack judgment. They treat problems as technical rather than social. If a street sees more accidents, the algorithm may lower the speed limit or adjust signals. It won't ask why people speed there in the first place or whether the road design is flawed. This focus on efficiency can lead to cities that run smoothly but feel distant. Public spaces become monitored zones. Parks have sensors. Streetlights track movement. Transit systems record each ride. These tools offer control, but also reduce the sense of freedom. People start to feel watched. Mistakes or odd behavior may trigger alerts. In some cities, predictive policing tools send officers to neighborhoods based on past data. This often reinforces existing biases rather than solving problems. The push for automation also reshapes daily life. In some buildings, elevators run without buttons, called by apps instead. Trash bins send alerts when they're full. Smart homes adjust temperature and lighting automatically. These features remove small tasks but also reduce direct interaction. The city becomes a place where systems act for you, not with you. This can erode public life. You don't need to talk to a driver, ask for help, or make a decision. The city anticipates your needs, but it also limits your choices. In many smart city plans, culture and identity take a back seat. Projects often begin with technology, not people. They start with a set of tools, then look for places to apply them. This can result in spaces that feel polished but generic. Public art, local customs, and informal economies may not fit into the model. Street vendors, buskers, and neighborhood markets may be seen as disorder rather than part of the city's life. If they can't be tracked or optimized, they're pushed aside. Democratic participation often struggles to find a place. Smart cities rely on dashboards, not town halls. Decisions are based on metrics, efficiency, cost, speed, rather than public debate. Residents may be asked to give feedback through apps or online polls, but the real decisions often happen between officials and private firms. Even when cities try to include public voices, the process can feel distant. Most people don't know how the systems work, what data is collected, or who makes the final call. Singapore is often cited as a successful smart city. It uses data to guide traffic, housing, and utilities. Its systems respond quickly to problems. The city is clean and orderly, but much of this control comes from a strong central government. Cameras monitor public spaces. Digital services track citizen behavior. These tools help the city function, but they also limit dissent and personal freedom. The trade-off is clear: greater efficiency at the cost of reduced personal space. In other places, the balance is harder to strike. When Los Angeles rolled out smart streetlights with built-in microphones and cameras, questions quickly followed. Who would access the data? How long would it be stored? Would the system be used to monitor protests or gatherings? Without clear rules and transparency, even helpful tools raise fears of misuse. Smart cities also risk deepening inequality. Wealthier areas tend to receive better services, faster internet, cleaner streets, safer roads, because they produce more data and offer better returns. Poorer neighborhoods, with limited infrastructure or informal economies, may be left out. Their problems don't fit the model. If an area lacks good digital signals, it may be invisible to the system. If residents avoid surveillance, their needs go unrecorded. Even basic services can be affected. In some cities, access to transportation, housing, or discounts depends on digital platforms. Those without smartphones or stable internet are excluded. Older adults, undocumented workers, and low-income families face new barriers. A system designed to be fair ends up reinforcing gaps. Not all smart cities ignore these risks. Some projects include public oversight, open data laws, and strong privacy protections. They invite residents to help shape the tools, not just use them. Barcelona made a clear choice to shift control of data from private companies to the city itself. It developed policies to protect privacy and support public involvement. But this requires ongoing effort. It needs education, access, and trust. The core problem with many smart city plans is not the technology itself, it's the way it is used. Tools become goals. Control becomes the measure of success. The city starts to serve the system rather than the people living in it. When planners design for optimization instead of experience, the result may be smooth but empty. People bring unpredictability, emotion, and culture to cities. These traits can't be measured or automated. They come from walking, talking, sharing, and building together. Smart cities that forget this risk, becoming places where systems run well, but life struggles to grow. Cities do not appear by accident. Even the most chaotic and unplanned neighborhoods are shaped by choices, some made decades ago, some made yesterday. Roads follow paths of trade or conquest. Neighborhoods form around jobs, rivers, or shared language. Schools, water pipes, bus routes, and zoning laws all guide how cities grow. Behind the surface of what seems natural is a long chain of planning, policy, and adaptation. Still, many discussions about urban design fall into extremes. On one side, we find rigid plans, cities drawn with straight lines and sharp zones, designed to control space and behavior. On the other, we hear praise for organic growth, where communities seem to build themselves over time. But these aren't opposites. Organic cities are not free of planning. They are just shaped by different kinds of decisions, slower, often less visible ones, made by many hands rather than a single vision. The real issue is not whether to plan, but how to plan. Rigid, top-down approaches fail when they ignore what people already do. They treat residents as users rather than experts. They impose systems from outside, often designed by people who do not live in the area. This creates friction. Spaces look polished but feel empty. Buildings follow rules but not needs. Streets are wide but unused. The plan may be complete, but the life it hoped to organize does not arrive. Cities work best when they make room for change. No one can predict the full range of human behavior. People adjust spaces to fit habits. They build shade over sidewalks. They open shops in their front rooms. They cut across grass to save time. They form networks of trust with neighbors, vendors, and local leaders. These actions respond to daily needs. Good planning does not try to prevent them. It leaves space for them to grow. This flexibility does not mean chaos. It means allowing for adjustment. A park can hold both scheduled events and spontaneous play. A sidewalk can host both walking and street vending. A bus route can shift with demand. These changes require listening. Residents must be part of the planning process, not just at the start, but throughout. Too often, input is treated as a box to check. A survey is done. A public meeting is held. Then, decisions are made elsewhere. Inclusion means more than asking for opinions. It means changing who has power. In many cities, the people most affected by urban policy, low-income residents, informal workers, renters, have the least influence. Their neighborhoods are often ignored or labeled as problems to be solved. But these communities already show how to use space creatively. They find ways to share resources, manage risk, and build social ties. Their knowledge should guide design, not be pushed aside by it. One way to do this is through participatory planning. In Medellin, Colombia, officials worked directly with residents of poor neighborhoods to shape public projects. They built libraries, transit lines, and public spaces with input from the people who would use them. These efforts were not perfect, but they helped build trust. They showed that planning can reflect real life. Another way is through design that invites adaptation. In some cities, planners build structures that can change use over time. A school becomes a market on weekends. A plaza hosts protests and festivals. Housing blocks allow for extensions, shops, or shared courtyards. These designs don't force one pattern of life. They allow people to fill the space with meaning. Infrastructure also plays a quiet but powerful role. Decisions about water, electricity, internet, and transport shape who has access to opportunity. A new train line can raise land values, displace tenants, or cut commute times. A lack of sewers can lead to illness or limit growth. These systems don't just serve cities, they structure them. Yet, they are often built without public input. Making infrastructure planning transparent and inclusive is one step toward more just cities. Technology, too, must be questioned. Smart city tools can support better services, but only if they serve human needs. Data must be open, not locked in private systems. Algorithms must be tested for fairness. Automation must not replace the human judgment needed in complex situations. A streetlight that dims to save energy is useful. One that tracks people's movement without consent is not. Education plays a role as well. When people understand how planning works, they can push for better outcomes. Workshops, school programs, and open records help demystify decisions. They allow more people to take part. A neighborhood that knows its zoning laws is more likely to organize against harmful development. A tenant group that understands how budgets work can fight for fair investment. Planning should also learn from mistakes. Many cities built public housing that became sites of isolation and decline. The design separated people from services, failed to support community, and didn't allow for change. These projects were often guided by good intentions, but ignored lived experience. They taught a hard lesson. Even well-meant planning can harm if it treats people as passive. Instead of chasing ideal forms, planners can work toward shared goals. Safe streets, clean air, access to jobs, schools, and parks. These are not abstract visions. They are daily needs. Meeting them requires both structure and openness. A city can set clear rules while allowing for difference. It can support growth without dictating form. In older cities, the street grid often came from top-down planning, but over time, people filled that grid with life. They shaped buildings, opened corner stores, and formed traditions. Planners can build on this pattern, laying foundations, then letting people take the lead. They can create strong bones and soft skin. They can guide without closing off. The role of planners is not to predict the future, but to prepare for it. This means building systems that can bend, not break. It means trusting residents to know what they need. It means shifting from control to support, from vision to conversation. Cities will always change. The question is whether we make space for people to shape that change or leave them to live within someone else's plan. The perfect city is easy to imagine. Streets are clean, traffic flows, buildings shine with order and purpose. Every part has its place and every problem has a solution. But this image hides more than it reveals. It leaves out the noise, struggle, and variety that make real cities what they are. It suggests that control is more valuable than freedom. It treats complexity as a flaw to be corrected rather than a fact to be understood. Plans that chase perfection often leave people behind. They flatten difference. They reduce lives to categories, worker, resident, consumer, and try to place each group in the right zone. They use rules to control space instead of opening it up. The result may look calm, but it lacks the tension and movement that make cities thrive. A place where everyone fits the plan is a place where few feel at home. Real cities don't follow neat lines. They change block by block, year by year. A small shop becomes a cafe. A parking lot becomes a playground. A quiet alley turns into a gathering space. These changes happen not because someone planned them, but because people saw what was missing and made something new. A city that works gives room for this kind of action. It sets the conditions, but doesn't fix the outcome. Too often, city design focuses on control. Wide roads, large plazas, and uniform buildings are meant to guide behavior. They assume that if space is managed well, people will behave well. But people are not problems to manage. They bring needs, ideas, habits, and hopes. A street vendor doesn't fit the plan, but they serve food, build trust, and support a family. A protest may disrupt traffic, but it speaks for those who feel ignored. These moments aren't signs of failure, they are signs of life. In older neighborhoods, design happens over time. A front porch becomes a shop. A corner lot becomes a garden. These changes are not official, but they meet real needs. They show how people shape the city from the bottom up. The perfect city leaves no space for these changes. It assumes everything important can be planned in advance. But cities work best when they welcome the unknown. When planners try to remove mess, they often remove people. Housing projects built for order often break apart communities. Streets designed for traffic push out pedestrians. Neighborhoods labeled as unsafe are cleared, not supported. The goal is safety or efficiency, but the result is distance and exclusion. The most polished places can also be the most hollow. Look at cities where control replaced conversation. In many planned capitals, from Brasília to Canberra, people live far from work, and public spaces stay empty. These cities look impressive from above, but on the ground, they feel disconnected. The buildings don't speak to daily life. The spaces between them are too large to invite gathering. The city runs, but it does not breathe. Smart cities face a similar risk. When data replaces dialogue, the city becomes a system to manage rather than a place to share. Sensors track behavior, but they can't explain it. Algorithms guide services, but they don't ask questions. The goal is optimization, not connection. People are expected to adapt to the system. Those who don't fit, those who move differently, speak differently, or live differently become invisible or suspect. Real safety and comfort come from relationships. Eyes on the street, familiar faces, shared spaces. These can't be designed into existence. They grow when people stay, talk, build, and care. They depend on trust, not on control. A park feels safe not because it has cameras, but because people use it. A street feels alive not because it's clean, but because it belongs to those who walk it. Even the strongest city must bend. Disasters, migration, poverty, and protest all shape urban life. A good city does not avoid these pressures, it absorbs them. It changes without falling apart. It allows people to make new patterns without losing their place. This kind of resilience does not come from perfect plans. It comes from a structure that listens, adapts, and grows. Participation is not a detail, it's the foundation. When people help shape their cities, they feel invested. They notice problems early. They protect what they build. They share knowledge that plans alone can't capture. A mother knows where a crosswalk should go. A shop owner knows why people gather at a certain time. A teenager knows where the streetlights fail. These voices matter. They must be part of how decisions are made. Some cities make space for this kind of work. In Porto Alegre, Brazil, residents help decide how budgets are spent. In Nairobi, Kenya, local groups map informal settlements to guide investment. In New York, tenants organize to shape development in their neighborhoods. These actions are not neat. They involve conflict, compromise, and slow progress, but they reflect how real cities grow, with input, not imposition. Culture also shapes space. Music, language, food, and faith all mark the city. They turn buildings into homes and streets into stages. They can't be programmed or automated. They emerge from people living together, sharing stories, and making meaning. A city that leaves no space for culture is not neutral. It is empty. Cities do need rules. They need clean water, safe roads, and strong buildings. But they also need room for difference. They need to serve people who don't drive, who don't speak the main language, who don't own property. They need to support both quiet and noise, work and rest, tradition and change. This is not a flaw. It is what makes a city worth living in. The goal is not perfection. It is depth, a place that holds memory, a place where people build lives, not just use services, a place where change is possible but not imposed. Cities shape people, but people also shape cities. The balance between the two makes urban life rich, difficult, and full of meaning. A tidy city may look good on a map, but a living city asks more of us. It asks us to share space, to listen, to disagree, and to find ways forward together. It asks us to plan with care, but not with fear. It asks us to leave room for what we don't yet know. Because in the end, cities are not products. They are stories, and we write them together.